as I said, for our attendees, I'm Jess Vogel. I am the CMO of OfferFit, and it's my pleasure to get to introduce a wonderful group of speakers and marketing leaders that I personally admire so much, to talk a little bit about how to think about AI in financial services and insurance. A few housekeeping items. So this will be a conversation between our panelists, but we encourage our attendees to drop questions in the chat. I will be monitoring and we'll either follow up with you directly, or if it's something for the panelists, make sure that it gets in front of Amy. So I want to thank all three of you for joining us today amidst your very busy schedules. It's my pleasure specifically to introduce our host, Amy Radin, who's going to introduce our other panelists today. Amy was the Chief Innovation Officer at E-Trade and the CMO of AXA Group. She's the author of the Changemakers Playbook and someone that's worked very closely with OfferFit for a number of years. So we're delighted to have her as well as our other panelists here today. Amy, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thanks, and really a pleasure to be here. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak with these two amazing executives and thought leaders. So just briefly, but I really want to turn over to Dave and Michael to introduce themselves. Dave and I have worked together for years, and I know him from his days at McKinsey, from where I was lucky enough to be a client, from his time at Aetna, and in his current role as a well-published author and very eminent thought leader. Michael is as you know, the CMO at MetLife, and also has had an amazing career around financial services, insurance, and consulting. So, Dave, why don't you tell a little bit more about yourself, and then we'll go to Michael, and then share in particular what attracted you to dedicate a lot of your career to insurance, and what are you doing in that world today?
Yeah, sure. So I currently, as Amy said, lead a bit of a portfolio life. I do executive advisory work with companies trying to adopt new digital and AI capabilities, realizing that marketing can really raise their game much further than it has in the past. I also work with venture capital companies on helping new AI startups go to market. I've been teaching also at Harvard Business School, and I do some advisory work with BCG. Before that, I was Chief Marketing Officer at Aetna. Before that, I helped build the digital marketing practice at McKinsey. I was one of the folks who started Digitas and started my career at BCG. I've been in the marketing, consumer information, technology intersection area since 1989. That ages me, I know, when I first wrote an article before the internet called Segment of One Marketing. And that became the foundation of my career, and things have really advanced. And as far as insurance goes, what led me to Aetna was a conversation with the CEO of Aetna at the time, Mark Bertolini, who felt that insurance companies should be changing their perspective from just simply providing an insurance product to actually helping people minimize their losses in the first place. And for health insurance companies, that meant helping people be healthier and actually building a relationship with members where they were a partner in helping people stay and get healthy. And that was a very radical change for an insurance company to try to do that. A lot of different marketing pieces had to come together. First of all, raising their customer experience and customer service game, building digital capabilities, really relaunching their brand, and then very specifically, which ties to this conversation, creating an engine of notifications, prompts, nudges to help people take healthier actions. And that to me seemed like an incredible marketing challenge to figure out how to get people to do the right thing for themselves. It required data capabilities, experimentation, constant testing and learning. And these were all things that right at the start of AI could benefit from those kinds of capabilities. So over 4 years, we gradually implemented more and more and more AI capabilities and really did move the needle And really surprisingly, like things like getting emergency room visits down because people realized they could go to an urgent care center for a lot of what they needed, getting people back on their meds when they had strayed. So it was incredibly rewarding, and learned a lot about the early days of how AI can transform the way companies interact with customers to add value. And that was a powerful set of learnings that I'm using a lot today. So, Michael, on to you.
Yeah, so similar to Amy, I first met David at McKinsey, way back, and then
Yeah.
and looked to him for inspiration based on the journey he just talked about at Aetna, and now we keep in touch as well.
Mhm.
And I will do the book plug, Dave, for you, because
Okay, thank you.
he's written an amazing. When Amy said, kind of a well-published author. She forgot to mention well-published recently with his new
That's
book on
right.
personalization, which I will say is a highly recommended. I was actually on a call with Tom Davenport yesterday, who was a kind of a legend who. And your name came up as we were talking about personalization, and he held up your book. So, your book
Oh,
is in
wow. Terrific.
amazing hands. So if anybody is out there looking for kind of, an amazing treatise on personalization and what it means, I think you should pick up that book. But in any case,
Thank you, Matt.
you know,
Michael.
the my path to insurance is really one that that is really about purpose. I spent time at TIA and Vanguard and realized that companies that are driven by purpose are incredibly satisfying places to be. And insurance has a history of purpose. The business model is built around around collectivism in a lot of ways, in these pooled risks. And what I found, kind of for me at least, was that being at a place like MetLife, with the history of a mutual for well over 100 years, purpose remained at the center of the business model of what we do and how we operate. And so for me, the journey to insurance was kind of the next logical place to see how a purpose-driven financial services company could have an impact on the world. And so I'm loving what insurance is transforming into, and I think to the point that David made, the technology is enabling things that we never thought were possible, for insurance, bringing even more value than just a financial product to our customers.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much for those really fascinating introductions. And just to put a pin in a point that Dave made that I'm sure we'll come back to, we all know as marketers, one of the most difficult but important challenges we face is helping the people we want to serve with behavior change. And, and I think that's a problem that certainly the marketers I've worked with have wrestled with their entire career, and it's even more complicated today. So I'm sure that's something we'll come back to because of how AI can play a role in helping to make progress on that really critical goal that not only helps us enable our purpose as insurance marketers, but also obviously strengthens the business model underlying everything that we're trying to do. So, yeah, certainly, I'd say all the employees I've ever known in the insurance industry, many are very attracted to the sector because of the sense of purpose, this idea of pooling risks to help people who are in need. And it's very emotionally motivating. It's a pretty complicated business model. And so delivering on that purpose day in, day out faces lots of challenges. I'd love for, let's start with Michael, since you're in an insurance operator's hot seat right now. Why don't you talk about what you see as some of the biggest challenges as you work with the organization to deliver on that purpose and manage all the complexity, probably one of the most complex industry I've ever worked in.
Yeah, it certainly, the complexity of insurance can be a big challenge for, for both our agents as well as our customers. And I think demystifying insurance and ensuring that the products kind of can be accessed and then meet the needs of customers is a constant challenge. But I think and that's just the nature of the insurance industry. I think the biggest challenge that I see right now is ensuring that we think about our role in society as being more than just providing the financial protection, that insurance products create. And really, this is only possible now with AI, where we can actually, meet the broader set of needs at the time of need. Like, this idea of a broader set of needs has been out there in insurance for a good amount of time, and I think there are lots of kind of platform attempts to meet those broader needs, but they didn't have the mechanisms in order to be there when somebody needed it, be specific to what their need was, and then deliver on, kind of on the satisfaction of that need. And I think what insurance now needs to do is actually take advantage of the advances in technologies to do all of those things, which is, figure out the need, figure out when the need is, and make the solution to that need, personal and applicable in that moment.
Yeah. David, you want to add any thoughts to that?
Yeah.
Where do you see the greatest challenges?
Yeah, just building on Michael's, I think there's, as I mentioned earlier, there's opportunities for insurers to help people minimize loss in the first place, because there are behaviors that people can do to improve their situation, safeguard things, precautions they can take, put in security, alarm systems, things like that. There's just a lot of adjacencies to the core insurance product that actually serve as enhancing insurance and preventing loss in the first place. And insurance companies have to figure out their role in that in terms of the ecosystem of things they can coordinate. Then when things do happen, as Michael said, orchestrating for a member, and I like to think of insurance customers as members, all of the different pieces that have to come together to address that. And that's actually a complicated ecosystem. You have to manage partner relationships, you have to understand financial flows, you have to figure out who you're going to call on for what situation, in which geographies, what level of responsibility you're going to take in the center, how you're going to involve the member in all of that. There's just a lot of customer journey, and then experience delivery work all around that. And so, we talk about AI, and I know we'll get more into that. There's AI for marketing, but there's also a lot of AI to coordinate and manage all those aspects of the delivery. And so and there's costs involved, and brand trustworthiness involved. And so just thinking about that whole system of helping people manage, mitigate, and deal with risk is just a much bigger palette than beforehand of what companies had to manage. And the way to compete is to step into it and figure out how to do that, which I know you're doing every day, Michael. And in a broad number of categories, which makes it also even more complicated. But at the same time, that's the opportunity from insurance, is that you can have that kind of impact for people.
Yeah. So great segue to my next question. Michael, where have you seen the greatest urgency within MetLife, and even maybe more broadly in the sector, around adoption of AI?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting. What I'm seeing right now in terms of adoption of AI is that the urgency and the immediate opportunity tends to be in things that drive efficiency. And so you look at the major processes, insurance, it's sales, it's underwriting, it's claims, it's customer service, because it's technology intensive, it's it's things like developer productivity. And so those are the places where I'm seeing, kind of a tremendous amount of urgency. And with, with a company with significant scale, those benefits can accrue pretty quickly, and drive, the capacity to invest even more in growth. And so that's where I think the biggest urgency is writ large in AI, in insurance in particular. Where I see the opportunity and the urgency from a marketing perspective is actually figuring out how this concept of composite AI comes together, right? So, AI in marketing is not new. Like, we've been talking about this and leveraging it for years. Even Gen AI in marketing is not that new. You look at cases like, CarMax, who were driving, kind of Gen AI, content for years. But the question then becomes is, how do AI models work together to drive, significant incremental or transformational impact on the customer experience? And I think that's where the urgency needs to be. We can all find a single AI solution or a single model to do something, but it's how do all these models work together in order to drive, even greater impact. And this idea of composite AI, this idea of multiple models working together in order to drive, enhancements in the customer experience is the thing that I think is the most urgent right now.
Yeah. So how do you, and David, I'm sure you'll have some thoughts on this. So I couldn't agree more that customer experience is where there is massive opportunity, and you need that view of composite AI to make it happen. The challenge becomes, given work I've done with my clients and then in my corporate roles, is customer experience touches everybody in the organization. So the stakeholder group is incredibly complicated, and you've got to, rally them. How do you get going? What are the first steps? How do you win belief that this is possible and worth spending time on? It's the great challenge of bringing any innovation into an organization. So David, I don't know, I'm sure you both have points of view, given, David, your time at Aetna, and Michael, what you're facing now. I'm sure our audience would love to, it's probably thinking, wow, that all sounds great, but where do I start?
Yeah. So you have to build credibility for the concept of what you are doing, which is essentially, in this case of what we're talking about, using customer information to create more value for a customer. That's in our book about personalization. That is actually how we define personalization. It's not just putting someone's name on a marketing message or just creating some slightly tailored content. It's actually giving them value based on information. So the question is, how do you prove that that's something worthy? And generally what I've seen, what we did at Aetna and what I've seen at other companies, is starting with one or two clear use cases that you just can't argue with, that we've been stymied, and there has to be an opportunity to unlock value. So, for example, at Aetna, people didn't understand their health insurance. Let's face it, it's complicated, as we're all saying. Health insurance is for a member, it's complicated. Most people during open enrollment, they sign up, they get a folder with all kinds of stuff in it, they put it in a drawer, they don't really understand it. We did research and we found that maybe 7% of people understood premium, copay, coinsurance, all the different terms that were involved. So that creates problems. People go out of network, they do things they shouldn't, they call into the call center, they're confused, they're upset, it costs money, it costs time, it might even challenge their health. And that's bad. So we have to educate people. If we can't make the product simpler, which I was strongly advocating to try and do, but if there are some constraints on that, then you at least have to educate people. So we started by creating personalized videos for people of their health plan. So when you became a new Aetna member, we worked with a service called Sunday Sky, and we offered everybody with simple animation, not the most high quality video, but it was good enough to say, Amy, this is who in your family is covered? Do they have a primary care relationship? If not, here are 5 doctors in your area who are accepting new patients who are in network. Click here to schedule. Here are benefits given your age and family structure that you should be thinking about taking advantage of. Here's how the economics work and the decisions. It was a total home run. 70% of people watched a 3.5 minute video. And that's a lot. Calls to the call center went down by over 20%. Net promoter score went up. People even opened our emails more often afterwards because they saw that we cared. And so starting with it, but that took a number of different groups to come together to make that work. It wasn't just a marketing thing because we thought, okay, people may call into the call center about the videos. So we had to make sure the call center was armed with that. We had to go through compliance, of course, to make sure everything we said was fitting. We had to work with IT to get the data in, but you couldn't argue with it. The concept made sense. And then as we had that success, it led us to others and keep pushing for others. And eventually we had 5 different areas of the company where we were using early forms of AI to drive new kinds of personalized experiences with a constant test and learn behind it. But you have to start somewhere where you can make a difference. It's not, don't just start by getting all the data together, start by the tools, start with a customer use case that's going to add value.
Yeah, I think that's so right. And by the way, I think implicit in your point is that a focus on efficiency can definitely improve the customer experience. And I've never seen a CFO who is much more willing to book cost saves off a business case than and they are, generally don't like to book revenue that hasn't already been, isn't 150% in the bank. So it's a smart strategy in terms of the internal dynamics and the power of the CFO. But I think you're definitely right. And certainly in the course I teach at Columbia to executives on strategic advocacy, a big point we focus on is this idea of coming up with a keystone change. So basically something really specific that can trigger a massive amount of belief, and that focusing in on that versus trying to, solve the world's problems at once is a much faster path to success. So Michael, are you seeing specific use cases that are very effective to take up at the beginning? And because MetLife is a multi-line business, I'm curious to know if where you see the progress, and are there different lines of business where there's more early potential to build that belief and energy that's necessary to bring this new technology into your business?
Yeah, one of the great things about MetLife is that we are multi-line, and this broad portfolio of kind of products and markets give us, multiple labs, if you will, to experiment with AI. What we, kind of in all of that diversity, we do have some key principles that we are using, and I'll talk about a couple of use cases as well. So one, we start with the commercial outcome, and this is where David started as well. So if you're creating value for the customer and creating value for the business, then that needs to be clear, and that actually takes some work. It could take some work to understand the variables that are going to be impacted or could be impacted, and the assumptions that you're making, and the ability to validate those assumptions, kind of through the next part of how we think about it, which is journey aligned and experiment driven, right? And so if you don't have a sense of what the customer journey is overall, then you have nothing, you have no way to align it, and it becomes almost an exercise in randomness. And if it's not experiment driven, then you'll never have the mechanism in order to confirm the assumptions that were in that initial business case that drives commercial outcomes. And so start with the commercial outcomes, make sure you're journey aligned and experiment driven. And then the third thing is there's this challenge that we try to avoid, which is death by 1,000 pilots. And so essentially, when we look at those commercial outcomes, we actually build the use case with a plan to scale. So the experiments are to validate the assumptions in that business case for the commercial outcomes, and then it's actually built with a plan to scale, which makes all of the difference in the world, because then once you get scale benefits, then you actually can, take advantage of what we'll call like the impact of a lighthouse project, like the thing that's actually able to do this. And so what we're seeing is that we're seeing examples both on the efficiency side, so digital adoption of the service experience in our group business, is driving significant efficiency benefits, and a lot of that is based on changing behavior, with our customers, which is really looking at the experience that they're having with the products and eliminating, some of that confusion that David was talking about, and meeting the needs of better and more timely information. And that all takes, data and personalization in order to be able to find the right, and experimentation in order to find the right, I would say, equation of pieces to solve. And so we're actively working on that. And then on the acquisition side, we have some products where especially in the lifecycle marketing world, where the blend between experimentation and personalization becomes kind of, I would say, a way to supercharge our acquisition. So if you look at what we're doing in pet insurance, that is a shopped product, even though it's part of the group portfolio, and the behavior is fundamentally different than somebody purchasing dental insurance or vision insurance through their employer. And so the life cycle marketing approach there, really benefits from the combination of experimentation and personalization in order to drive conversion differently. And so that's one example of where we're using, nested reinforcement learning models in order to drive, experimentation and personalization.
Yeah, and as a pet owner, I can really relate. David, what were you gonna add?
Yeah, I just want to build on that word experimentation, because that's really important, and we talk a lot about that in the book and give examples, because AI needs data, and the more you experiment, the more you're creating data that helps the AI understand variability. And those constant experimentations of different variables, and of course, we're on a webinar sponsored by OfferFit, and OfferFit does provide the capabilities to manage multivariate testing at scale with speed. And what we've seen across companies who are doing this well, not just insurance, but as in writing the book, we did research on personalization leaders across sectors. And one of the most important distinguishing factors was their cycle time for test and learn. So working in quick, rapid 2-week cycles to get tests out the door. And then there's a range of tools to enable that. So there's predictive modeling tools that says, well, who should you be going after with what? There's now Gen AI tools to help you create content, and you probably need a human in the loop to work that and make sure compliance fits and all of that. Then there's tools like OfferFit to be able to manage the selection of the test cells and set up the multivariate. Then you've got getting it out the door in terms of the channels, getting the information back. So there's a number of different things. So this also touches on the composite AI point that Michael raised before. But stringing that together, all in the name of constant, relentless test and learn, and having groups of people who are working together to do that, is the key to driving better experiences and performance. It's proven across every company that we looked at. So that concept of experimentation just goes hand in hand with everything else that we're talking about.
Yeah. So what all this is saying to me is, what's coming to mind is that the role of the marketer and the way the marketer has to be thinking about what talent do I need on the team, the mindset, the skills, the methods and processes to even begin to take full advantage of a tool like OfferFit or the many other capabilities that are out there has to be really different. So, Michael, how is this impacting the marketing function. And when you think about skills, mindset, methods, and processes, what are you doing differently? And what's your advice to the marketers on this call?
So I think one of the most important things that we are focused on, and it goes to David's point about experimentation, is almost raising the metabolic rate of the marketing organization. Right? It's like you have
Love
to.
it.
It's coined by one of my marketing leaders, so I won't take credit for it. I'll give him credit for it. But
all right, I'm writing it down. I love it.
Yeah, and so the expectations of speed and throughput of experimentation, in marketing organizations tend to be constrained by all sorts of different things. And so the question then becomes is how do you create the mindset and the curiosity as well as the process discipline, required to actually increase that metabolic rate so that you're getting, to David's point, if you're doing agile in 2-week sprints, you're getting, even with, 20, 25 tests every 2 weeks on your campaigns. And so I think that's a really important piece of this, which means that the coordination across different parts of the organization needs to be really, really different. I mean, how do you do that and still deal with the regulatory requirements of compliance and legal reviews of content? Well, in every sprint, we do a live review of all the content with the legal team. So it's not a handoff. It's not a process. It's not an SLA. It's actually, they're part of the agile process. And that can raise the metabolic rate of people outside. What if we need new capabilities? Well, all of the sprints are driven by the capabilities we have, and then a backlog is created for the development agile team in order to be able to create the new capabilities that we need for the next sprints. And so there are all of these, I would call them, I don't like to think them as hacks because they become part of the operating kind of model for the group, but at the beginning they feel like hacks in order to get that metabolic rate up. And so I think that's one of the most important things. I also think that we have to look at marketing slightly differently, and we have to look at it as analytics plus execution, because the only way of getting things moving fast enough is actually getting the pace of analytics and execution up. Look, my first jobs in marketing were around creative, and so I am a believer in the power of creative. Creative makes it come alive. Don't tell me how much you're going to optimize unless you show me the creative, right? Because that's going to make all the difference in the optimization. But I think we need to have skills and capabilities that change the mindset in terms of what do we start with, and we start with analytics and execution, because that's what's going to give us the insight into what commercial outcomes are going to be able to be achieved, and then what data is needed in order to actually drive the behavior change. And behavior change is not just about the behavior, in a customer service perspective. We're driving behavior change in terms of selection, kind of at the front end of the marketing process as well.
That's amazing.
So one thing, Michael, I want to build on in terms of what you're saying with execution and analysis. If you really think through that, it pushes against what I consider the hyper specialization that marketing has become. It should not take 13 people to get a marketing program out the door. But yet it does in a lot of companies, especially bigger ones, where you've got people who are only focused on social execution or SEO content creation. And everything's gotten completely hyper specialized, which also makes it hard for people to grow in their careers because they're too locked into very narrow pathways. A lot of the reason for that is because each of these channels had idiosyncratic ways that the technology worked to execute and to analyze data. And so you had to understand Meta's approach or Google's approach, and you became expert in that, and therefore you justified your specialization. AI is going to change that. It already is. It's taking a lot of those execution capabilities and automating them. It's taking a lot of the analysis things that you needed to do and able to pull data and integrate it. So I believe, and I'm already seeing this in clients I'm working with, that specialization is getting reduced to more the
Mhm.
threesome of analytics, execution, and creative. I will add creative more
Yes.
explicitly,
Yes.
but not hyper specialization underneath that. And so you've got
Yeah.
smaller teams who are working together with people who are more flexible, who are thinking more broadly and not locked in, because they can just get it done and work together and jockey. So I think there is a big change happening in marketing organization that's
Yeah.
along these lines.
Yeah, David,
Yeah,
I want to add one really quick thing, Amy, on this. This is the when you align to an actual customer journey, this this kind of ossification of roles around channels starts to become a big blockade from actually meeting the client where they are across a multi-channel journey. And so, to David's point, like unless we move in the direction that David just suggested, we will never actually be able to drive journey aligned, kind of experiences for our customers, because we'll always have, a separation that is not actually real in their experience. And so I think if you take it from the customer perspective, there's an imperative from a customer perspective in order to move in this direction.
Yeah, and what I'm taking away is exciting implications for the careers of any marketer. Even if you are in a somewhat specialized role, you've got to be able to see the forest from the trees. And now I just want to turn to Jessica for a minute, because I see there's a question that you want to raise, and I can't see the whole question. So why don't you pop in with the question that you have for Michael?
Yes. So thanks to everyone who's put in questions so far. So Michael, this question was for you. The goal of a pilot is to scale, but oftentimes we get stuck. What parameters do you implement to avoid death by 1,000 pilots?
Yeah. So it starts at the very beginning. So instead of sizing the pilot, we size the entire thing for that would scale. And so capture the imagination of the organization with, kind of the end state, and in fact, I actually don't call anything pilots anymore. I call them phase one. It's phase one of the scaling plan. And even that mindset changes how people view, kind of success or failure in it. So if you call it a pilot, then failure means it ends. If you call it phase one, then failure means that you have to actually just work harder on different set of experiments in order to validate the hypotheses or change the hypotheses for the plan. There's a huge mindset part to this, which I think is really, really important. And it starts with kind of, capturing the imagination of the organization about the ultimate commercial outcome. And then even just simple things like changing the language about what you're calling things can take away the assumption that there's an end to the thing that you're doing. So two other things. It's just this is putting me on my soapbox for a second, Amy. But like, there's
Love it.
My feeling about this is that we have given up we have given up our ability to really push through some of these barriers, because we are too shy about trying some of the stuff out that's going on. But the truth is one, AI is math. Like, it's been proven, like the math actually works. So we should be confident in that. We've been marketers for a long time, and marketing works to create commercial outcomes. And so, like, what I see in the idea of pilots is a lack of confidence in some cases. And I think we need to be confident that we are excellent practitioners that are backed by really solid math that has been proven effective in the application of AI. And that's kind of a mindset shift I think we need to make.
Yeah, it sounds like it also requires tremendous advocacy and to build adoption and belief. And you certainly sound like you are a very passionate advocate. I'm sure the audience would love, what's your advice to the other marketers? And you're the CMO. So some people might say, well, easy for you. You're like the big gun. I believe that this kind of advocacy can happen at any level of an organization.
Yeah.
It's not just on, it's too much pressure for you to carry the ball. Everybody
Yeah.
has to. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on, how do you become an effective advocate for, accelerating the introduction of AI, particularly for personalization, which is such a powerful capability for marketers, given their role in contributing to customer acquisition, retention, engagement, revenue growth, and profitability.
So you just rattled off a whole bunch of performance measures, Amy, and I think
Yep.
it starts with the marketing leader really understanding the economics of the business, which in insurance is challenging. And I have to admit, when I became CMO at Aetna, it took me almost a year before I could sit in the monthly meetings, going through the financials and completely understand all the puts and takes.
Yep.
Yeah.
But you have to, and you have to become
Mhm.
fluent in it. You have to see the second order effects and the ripple effects of what you're doing. And the more you're grounded in that and bring that into the way you describe opportunities and the logic of the business, the more powerful you'll be, and you'll get more support, especially from the CFO's organization, because some of this requires investment up front. So tying it to the business drivers, as opposed to just cool ideas, and even things like general, oh, it'll help NPS. That's still wishy-washy. So
Yeah.
we got to take it down to more specific things. So you've got to be grounded in that as you're laying it out. And then as you start coming up with ideas, it's not just about personalization, it's about personalization to accomplish certain things better, and change the way you and the customer have a value exchange that's going to drive your business, that's going to build switching costs, that's going to allow you to drive certain behaviors or capture certain data that's going to give you advantage. But bring it all into, again, the use case, the business impact of the use case, and not just the theory that personalization is good. I mean, we've seen that. And, in the research we did with our book, we actually found that leaders in personalization grow 10 percentage points faster over 3-year periods than laggards. And it was consistent across a number of different categories. So that we were able to document, and we have a whole study behind that. But it's not just about personalization, it's for a purpose and a business impact. So I'm sure that's something you're in the middle of every day, Michael.
Yeah, this is exactly it. I mean, and so let me give you a practical example of like understanding of the business and how marketing has to kind of change what they think about and the metrics they use. It's for us in many of our businesses, it's not about the marketing CPA. That is not the full economic driver of value in the context of an insurance product. Our goals and the case we make include all of the aspects that drive LTV. Claims is not somebody else's problem. It's retention is not another team's problem, right? Those are huge drivers of LTV in marketing. So yes, is acquisition cost, something that is front and center, of course, but all of the elements of LTV are critically important. And until you can get your arms around all of those elements, as well as I would say the construct of all the people that are required in order to both understand and impact those things, then I think it's going to be really difficult to drive the overall commercial agenda.
Can I hop in
So
with a question that's a related follow-up? Sorry. So just speaking to the data, one of the questions from our attendees was how to think about customer satisfaction and CSAT, and how important that is, or if companies should really just be focusing, Michael, as you just mentioned, like on that customer lifetime value and everything shakes out from there. So are you thinking, or any of you in current or past roles, how are you thinking about like that customer satisfaction as part of the overall mix?
Yeah, so I'll give a couple thoughts on this. So we can see in some of our metrics that customer satisfaction is a leading indicator for future commercial outcomes. One of the biggest drivers of brand, at least in some of the categories we're in, is the experience. And we've seen that as a driver of actually selection and retention for us. So we do pay a lot of attention to customer satisfaction. It also is a critical element of the analysis of the customer journey. Because if you don't know how people feel about the customer journey, then you don't know what to attack in the customer journey. I would also say that there's work that has to be done in order to create much tighter correlations between CSAT and other commercial outcomes. But in the end, and so it's an important measure. But in the end, the thing that matters the most are the things that show up in the GAAP or stat financials, right? And so those are the things that need to be kind of the end goal of any secondary measurement or any program or campaign.
Yeah, and the starting point. So I've got one final question for both of you that we'll do as a lightning rod, so that we can turn over to Jessica for Q&A. So quickly, where do you see the insurance industry in 3 to 5 years when it comes to AI adoption? And where do you think the biggest opportunities are in AI for the insurance industry, and particularly for marketers in the sector?
So I'll start, Michael, because I have a few things off the top. I think one is you'll definitely see more in the way of automation of processes. So I think of AI in terms of 3 levels. There's a first, which I call for me, where I'm using ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, to just help my own personal productivity. The next level is for us, and that is where you're looking at processes in the company, usually functional processes, things like cleaning up all the legal documents, things like getting content out the door. Those are process-oriented, often automation, cost reduction. And then the third level is for our customers to actually change the value proposition, the way you compete, the perception of what somebody has of your brand and the value they get. I think we're going to see a lot in the for us in terms of automation of all different back office processes. Those are going to be streamlined, and then there'll be questions, I think, in insurance about if you're that good, should you be selling those services to others? I think there's going to be issues around that are going to pop up. But then for our customer level, we're going to see more in the way of integrated solutions being offered. I want to come back to cycle back in this conversation to where Michael was talking about, handling at the point of need everything. AI can actually help control the flow of information across parties. It can enable information flows to be more compatible, more integrated, and we're going to see more in the way of ecosystems being developed to address certain kinds of needs in an integrated way. More and more health insurers are going to be working directly with providers and with other third parties, med tech companies, to have an integrated ecosystem of how information flows to enable the management of health. I gotta believe things like claims resolution, all of the things that happen in property and casualty, for example, those are all going to be connected in a network. And we're going to see ecosystem competition, and a lot of your brand will be dependent on the way you manage that ecosystem, because AI is enabling you to do much more as a multi-party organism to solve a customer's problems.
Yeah, I'd build on that and just say, we are, as marketers, AI is going to enable us to orchestrate. And that is going to be, I think, one of the key elements of the value proposition. And the orchestration is going to be around what I see as 3 mega trends in that insurance will have to respond to. One is longevity. The second is security. In a more volatile world, people are being more proactive about their security, and wellness. Wellness is coming up in almost every sector of insurance and financial services as something that is that needs to be an integrated, concern. And I think orchestration around I think wellness is going to be probably where things start. I think orchestration around security is going to be something that's demanded, and we're going to have to contend with how people design their lives and their work lives differently due to longevity. And I think that's where AI, in all three of those areas, I think AI is going to enable insurance providers to be orchestrators.
Quite a vision. Thank you so much for the conversation. Over to Jessica, who's going to bring us into the audience Q&A.
Yes, this has all been so illuminating. So we have two great questions. If anyone else has them, feel free to put them in. So the first question that we got was, how do you overcome the legal, security, and IT concerns around using AI and customers' data? Understanding that there's going to be red tape, or there may be red tape around AI within your organization.
I would say, I'll give you a quick answer on this. One of the most important things is to actually be specific, because when you talk in generalities with kind of with control functions, then imaginations create kind of more complexity or more challenge than needed. But like, once you get specific about the problem that's trying to be solved, it creates a platform where imagination is not part of the discussion, and you can actually be tangible about these, kind of what needs to happen. Legal has been a huge enabler of increasing the metabolic rate of my teams, and it's because we are specific and clear about what we need and what they need as well in this process. I think data, having clarity in how and where data is coming from and what it's being used for creates, an incredible efficiency. And then, understanding what actually needs to change from an IT perspective, and using MarTech platforms to drive more configuration than coding, also helps raise the metabolic rate. And so I think, specificity makes a big difference here.
That's great. Thank you. We have another question. With a clearer path to one-to-one marketing, do we need a new model for audience segmentation and personas from kind of the traditional broad clusters to what are the shifts that we might need to make?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. I think there's still personas, because you need to use that for ideation, for coming up with ideas, for understanding needs. It's not that you're going to create completely separate products for every single individual. So you absolutely need the concept of personas to drive that. A lot of what drives personalization are more micro variations, some of which timing, when somebody needs something in the market, certain aspects of their level of readiness. There's just more micro things, but that will drive triggers, that will drive variations in terms of content. It may drive the change in channel. But the general things that you're trying to help people do, the general innovation still would be driven by segments and personas. So a lot of the one-to-one gets super tactical, but in those tactics, you're adding value to an individual. You need the bigger picture to figure out what should that value be in the first place.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I think the distinction between segmentation and personas is important, and what they're used for is really important. And I agree with David 100%. When you're trying to figure out how to be efficient in driving solutions and value propositions to meet customer needs, personas are super, super important as an organizing principle. But the personalization, to David's point, is at a more micro level, and segmentation kind of sits in between those two things, in some situations where we have essentially use statistical methods in order to emphasize differences that may not be the things we need to personalize around, because they don't address some of those micro elements, and also may not actually get us to the commonality, which will enable us to be more efficient in driving value propositions in product. And so I think there's an important distinction, I think technical distinction, that we need to be aware of in personalization, segmentation, and personas.
That's great. And I really love kind of how you're all thinking about the approach, that you still need those foundational things. Doesn't mean that you're going to be recreating the wheel for every single persona or segment. Great. If we don't have any other questions from the audience, I think we will have some closing remarks for today. So I guess first want to extend a sincere thank you to Amy, Michael, and David, 3 extremely busy people who took an hour out of their time to educate this audience. We're massively grateful. The other thing that I wanted to mention is Michael very kindly plugged David's new book up front. We are actually hosting another webinar on November 20th. I will drop the link into this chat, where you can get your own copy of David's new book on behalf of OfferFit. And we'll talk a little bit more about what this means and how this has evolved for CMOs. So thanks everyone for your time today. Thank you to our amazing panelists and speakers. Again, I'm awestruck getting to hear from all of you, and I know our audience is too. So thanks for your time today, and thanks to everyone who's joined us.